Well, I'm going to try to take you through kind of the process of what I did here. So what I did is I cut frets into the correct length. And the other thing that I want to add is that there's a little bit of an arch on the neck, so you need a fret bender that will actually take the fret wire and run it through, and it'll put a little bit of an arch on this whole thing, and then you can cut them to fit. And basically, the other thing that I did to get these frets to go in a little easier, so I used a little small triangular file like this, and before I put that fret in, I went back and forth on the fret slot just to cause a little bit of a V, if you will, right at the top here. At that point, you take your fret, make sure you've got the tang, which is the little part that sticks down that goes into the actual fret slot itself. Make sure you got the tang into the fret slot. I have a couple of fret hammers. I have a small one. I have also a bigger one. And basically all you do is hold the fret in there and get the both edges into the fret slot. Give it a couple wraps on this side. Give it a couple wraps on this side. And then what you'll have is you'll have both sides of the fret into the slot. It'll be just the middle of it sticking up. And you need to give it a 2 or 3, 4 really good wraps with the fret hammer. Fret hammer's got like rubber ends on it here, so it's not going to damage the metal of the fret. The other thing I just want to make sure that everybody realizes is when you're doing this, make sure you've got a proper base underneath the neck of the guitar while you're doing this hammering in of the fret. You don't want to have something hard underneath here where it's going to put a dent or damage the back of the neck, eh? So as you're hammering in, you're moving this along underneath where you're doing your hammering. So just a word of caution on that. Once we get the frets in, the next step we're going to be looking at doing is we have what we call a leveling bar. It's an absolute straight aluminum bar. It's got a fine grit and a coarse grit on each side. You can replace the tape. It's a stick-on, like a 3M type of tape. So what you're going to do is you're going to go in with the truss rod. Make sure you get this neck in an absolute straight position. Once you get in a straight position, you're going to take this and you're going to level the frets with a back and forth action like this. And one of the things that you can do is you can take like a magic marker and you can mark each fret. And then what's going to happen is you move this leveling bar back and forth, and it's slowly grinding away on the top of the frets. Get to the point where all the red's gone. There's no red showing through. You know you've pretty well got those frets all level. And like I say, probably depending how much you got to take off, start with the coarse grit and then go to the fine grit to finish it off. So that's kind of the next step to get that part of it done. So at this point, you got the frets in, you've got the frets seated, you got the frets hopefully leveled. One thing I wanted to mention though, this case here, these frets were extremely hard to pull out, and these frets, man, it took a lot of pounding to put them in. There is absolutely no way those frets are going to come out of there. So at this point, usually what I would be doing is I'd be cutting off the fret ends with a good fret nipper like this. And after I got them all nipped off, I'd probably be looking at turning the guitar up on its end there and make sure that the fret end is seated in correctly. And I'd be putting a drop of crazy glue on each all along this end, all along that end, to make sure the ends don't lift. But you know, in this case here, I'm going to forsake that process because these bloody things I don't think there's any way those frets are going to come out of there in any easy method at all. So I think I'm pretty safe to forego and not put that crazy glue in. So at this point, we're basically looking at doing a couple things still left to do. We have to dress the edges of these frets, and if you look closely at the fret, there's about a 30-degree angle on these frets on the side here, and we have a tool. It looks something like this. It's got a handle like you can hang on to it, and it's got about a 30-degree angle with a file set right into it. So basically, what you do is you take this thing and you run it up and down on this side. Now I've already done this side, okay? And what that's going to do is that's going to put a bevel angle on the edge of the fret, okay? And then what you're going to do is you're going to turn it around and you're going to do exactly the same thing for the other side. So I'm just going to demonstrate that right here. You can feel it. And you just keep going. And it's going to get closer and closer. And you're going to keep doing that until you get the bevel right to the edge of the fretboard. Okay? So I'm going to continue on with that. There's no sense you watching all this work. And once I get that beveling done on each side correctly, then we're going to come back and we're going to take a look at how we finally do the final dressing on these fret ends. Because right now, these are sharp, quite sharp. And I use a really nice little fret file. Again, from StewMac is where I get this one from. And it's got a rounded edge on this end. And it's smooth. It's got a flat end on this side, and it's smooth, and it's only got the filing on each side, on the wide side of the file. So what that means is you can go along on the end of a fret. You're going to see this on the overhead cam, and you're going to be able to go like that, and you're going to be able to file that fret off. But because it's got a nice smooth surface on the bottom here, it's not going to mark your fretboard. So anyway, you do need the right tools to do this kind of work. So anyways, I'm just letting you know. And I'm going to stop right now, and I'll continue on with this beveling of the edges. And we'll take up the video when I start doing the final dressing on these frets. So over and out for now. See you shortly. Well, good morning. I'm going to take you over to the workbench. What I did first thing this morning was I masked the fretboard. So that when I do my final polishing on the frets, there's no chance of me causing any damage to the wood on the fretboard itself. So this is kind of the normal thing for me to do when I'm going to be, doing the final polishing on the frets. Once that's all done, the only thing left to do then is going to be the final filing on the actual fret ends to take the sharp edges off, which you'll see in the process as well. Obviously, as I said earlier, I'm not going to be showing you me doing every one of these frets for the polishing. I'm going to do 2 or 3 of them just so you see the process, cut the video, and then I'll finish the polishing on offline. You don't want to watch me do all that. And then we'll do the same thing when we do the fret ends. I'll do 2 or 3 so you see the process, and then I'll stop the video and I'll continue on till they're all done offline. So if you're interested in seeing this process, stand by, be right back. Well, I got you up in the sky cam, so hopefully you can see this okay. Just when we're talking dressing of the final dressing of the frets, there's 2 or 3 things that have to be done after you've leveled the fretboard that you've seen in the previous video. The first thing you got to do is you got to recrown these. What recrowning does, it means it puts a little sloping edge on each side of the fret, and it makes the top of the fret narrower, so that your point where the string is hitting the top of the fret is a smaller area, And that does 2 or 3 things. The first thing it does is it makes the intonation, you know, better, so that there's not a chance of it being off. It also gives a smaller surface area on the top when you're doing, for example, string bends and that. So to do that crowning, what I use is I have a file here from StewMac that I use. It's got basically a V on 2 sides of it, one for you know, the basically a medium-sized frets and one for smaller sized frets. And I've already done that, but I'm going to on this fretboard, but I'm going to demonstrate how it's done. And what you basically do after you've marked off and protected your fretboard, you take a marker. It doesn't matter what kind, hopefully not a permanent marker. You wouldn't want to make a mistake. But you can run like a line down there. I'm using a red marker here because I can't find my blue marker. But basically, what you do, you take your crowning file, and you go back and forth across the top of it like that. And the goal is to achieve a narrow line right across the top of the fret, just like you see here now. I'm going to look for a different marking pen here. Let me see if I can get one that, I don't know if I got one that's going to show up a little better. Try this brown one here, just for giggles here. See if this shows up a little better. Not really. But anyway, I think you're kind of get the idea. I'll try one more time with the red here, see if I can get it to show. That looks better. And we just take our crowning file and we go back and forth across the top like this. And if you look closely, I just have a little fine line edge right across the top of that fret. So that's basically the crowning process. And it doesn't take a lot. When you use the marker, maybe you're going to go back and forth 7 or 8 times on that fret to get that crowning done. And that's that process. Once that's done, the second process we have to do, which I do, is I now polish these frets. And I do that. I use a regular eraser. I'm using 6/800 grit, I think this is 800 grit sandpaper. And I wrap it around the eraser like this. And then all I do is I go to that fret and I go up and down, up and down. I'm using quite a bit of force, pushing down hard. Because that eraser's soft, what happens when you push down? It allows a little indent to happen. And what will happen, the sandpaper will kind of wrap around the top and down the sides of that fret. So basically, you're polishing the top of the fret, and you're also at the same time, you're basically polishing the side of the fret as well. So you get something that looks like this. And the whole goal of this is to polish this thing so it's just like a mirror finish. So you shouldn't see any scratches or any little marks on the top of the fret. And like I say, this is a time-consuming process. You can see how much effort it takes. And I'm going to keep polishing this till I get this fret done. And I'm going to go to the 3rd fret and I'm going to polish it. And that basically is the polishing process. So I'm going to stop the video right now and continue on with the polishing. Be back shortly. Just wanted to give you this short look. Now what I've done here, I've got the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frets polished. These are the new ones I put in, and down here are the old ones. So you can see on the new ones, as we look at the light that's hitting those frets, you can see how the light hits and how shiny, just like a mirror finish on those first 6 frets. Now we're going to move down to the old frets, and you can see the difference between the old frets down here. Okay, take a good look. And the new frets up here. Lighting's the same. These are polished. These are unpolished. If I put a couple of the polished beside the unpolished, it really shows the difference between the polished and the unpolished frets. So the goal is to get all the frets, even though I didn't change these. These are the originals. The goal when you're doing this work is let's do a really good job and let's make sure we get all the frets on the whole fretboard all done correctly and polished. The polishing is what makes the guitar, especially when you're doing bends, string bends on a guitar, makes those bends easy. If you look at little nicks that you see in the frets here, what'll happen with that little, there's a little ding there, it's just a little mark. What'll happen is continual playing, the strings will eat away at that little mark, and that little mark will end up becoming like a deep gouge, let's say a year and a half from now. So the smoother and more polished I can get these frets, the longer these frets are going to last. So that just gives you a little overview on fret polishing and the importance of good fret polishing. Okay, over and out. Well, I just wanted to show you what everything looked like once this final polishing got all done on all these frets. So we're just going to take a look down here and run up the fretboard, and you can see once this is all done, right across the piece of all these frets, you can see the kind of a polish that we're shooting for on a fretboard. So with that done, the next little phase is going to be just basically the filing on the ends here. And on the overhead video, I'll put it up on the Skycam to do that and do a few of them. But there's something else I noticed on this this fretboard that I found really strange. And when I look at the frets that I replace, and I look at the ones that were there before, I took a measurement to make sure of this. But from this point down, if I go and look at the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 frets, those frets all seem to be the same size. Now, all of a sudden, when I get down in this area, believe it or not, the frets on the bottom end of this guitar neck are a lot narrower than on the top half. So I don't know if that's by design or normal, but like I say, I replaced the up to here, but you know, I'm looking at the frets I replaced. These frets are all the same size, but look what happens here. All of a sudden, especially down in here, these, I measure them, the frets are a lot smaller than what you'd find in this area. I don't know, I just found that strange. But like I say, maybe it's by design, I don't know. Anyways, we're going to look at that a little later on. So anyway, stand by. Well, all the polishing's done. We still got the protective tape on. And now comes probably the most, I would say, the most monotonous part of the job. And that is to put the file to these ends here. And I usually make sure I've got protection on the fretboard when I'm doing this, just to make sure that there's no nick to the fretboard. But to make a long story short, I've done these two prior to this video starting. And I don't know if you can see the difference between these two frets and these ones here that haven't been done yet. But if I run my finger along here, there's absolutely no sharp edge that I can feel. So when I'm playing a guitar like that, there's no perception of anything that's sharp on that edge that's going to grab my finger. However, if I go down to these here, that's a different story. And if I was to take like something like a little paper clip and run it along here, you see what happens? See here, very, very little. This here will catch. There's a real sharp edge right here on both corners. So the goal is to get rid of those. And again, I pointed out before this little StewMac fret file that's got basically a flat edge on this one side here, a couple sides, and then fine filing on the the wider sides. So what you're going to do is you're going to go along here, and you're going to round it off like this with a rounding motion, and you're going to do both sides, and you're drawing it over the top of the fret, eh? So it's not only pushing this way, it's also rounding across the top of the fret. You can see the motion that I'm using here to do this. And we're going to keep going until we get to a point where this fret is no longer sharp. And I'm almost to that point right now. But we're going to make sure it's very important you roll over the top like I'm doing. Very important. You have that roll over the top of the fret. And right now, that fret basically has no sharp edge at all pointing out on the over the edge here. Nothing. So that's the goal. Now, of course, on a total fret-refret job on a guitar, you'd have to do this on all the frets. What I'm going to do is I'm definitely going to do it on the first 6 that I replace, but then I'm also going to go along and just, if I have to, do a little touch-up on the ones, if I notice any sharp edges, like for example right on this side, even the frets that are there, there's a couple, that one there, pretty good. There's one there. One there, just 2 or 3 that need a little redressing. So basically that's the goal. So we've got this one pretty well done. We're going to go to the next one and you watch the action again. You notice, like I say, I've got a rounded edge here on this side, and it's flat. So when I go like this, that's not going to go in and damage the wood on the fretboard. But watch the action across the top. See how I'm drawing it across the top, over the top, and we just keep that up, and we keep going till we get to that fret. Now I take special care probably on these fret ends, maybe more than most techs would, because for me, I know when I play a guitar, the last thing I want is a sharp fret end. So I make absolutely sure when I do the dressing here that there's no chance of anything that's going to catch my finger. So I'm a little due diligence on this part of it. Like I say, more so than most people would be. But like right now, that feels really good along those. A little bit across the top, just to make sure. Very nice now. Very nice. So I'm not going to bore you with the rest of the fret filing on these ends. I'm going to continue on and I'll finish this up. And I think at that point, once that's done, I'll be taking this green protection tape off. And at that point, we're just basically going to be looking at doing a setup on this guitar, just a normal setup, a restring job, and set the action, set the relief, and give it a shot, see how she plays. So stay tuned, we'll see the outcome.